Okay, we're trying again. Cheryl says we're muted. Charlene says we have no sound. Uh, oh boy. So this is some of the challenges, if anybody can hear me yet, of going live. Can somebody let me know if they hear me out there yet? No, nobody can hear me. So we have a problem. Dave is saying it's good now. Okay. Boy, this makes it agonizing for me to get my flow going. But we're debugging. This is our second week of the show. Somebody's saying it's still, I don't. Okay. I think you can hear me. Where was I? This is triggered. We're back. Thank you for your patience as we sort out all the buttons to push. That's part of it. We got a new studio. We're adding equipment all the time. It's getting better and better, but we still always have these little hiccups. So what I was rambling about was talk radio. We don't need it. We've got this. So of course, talk radio, yeah, they've ironed out all those little bugs and everything so far, but we will too. And there's going to be some good debate in that, and talk radio of today, for the people who've listened to it for a long time, I mentioned like in Alberta, Rutherford, or we used to have Peter Warren. I mean, these guys were fun, and they took, issues on, and they commented, and now it's just vanilla. It's dull. It's boring. The media is cowardly. They don't touch the controversial issues. At best, it's just, you turn on the radio so you can get the traffic report and the weather. If you want some good commentary, this is the place to get it. So thank you guys who have tuned in so far and keep tuning in. And just a reminder, we do upload the audio. You can look it up for Western Standard or wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and you can download the audio and listen at your leisure in case you can't catch it while it's live, and take that in. So being live as well, the good and bad things, the bugs are a pain, but the interaction is good. So thank you for all the thumbs up to remind me that we've got sound again. And yes, comments are welcome. I want that interaction. I want to hear from you guys back and forth. Some of what we're going to hear back and forth. I've got as a guest today, Clinton Devoe. Those who are familiar with him, he's from Halifax. He talks on a lot of political issues, and he's very pro-electrical vehicle. And he wants to talk about those things in mining and opportunities for it. And I know it'll get a lot of people wound up. Clinton tends to, but I like talking to him. He gives a different perspective and a different point of view. We don't all have to agree on everything all the time, but he'll make some good points, I think. He's going to be on a little later. Before him, I'm going to have Derek Fromm. He's a lawyer who's spoken a lot on constitutional issues. He's worked on those things. And he's going to talk to me about, the legalities of Quebec's move to try and tax people who've chosen not to get vaccinated. I mean, can it be done? Will they be allowed to carry on with this? Will it withstand court challenges? I don't know. And will Quebec care if a court rules it down? I mean, Quebec's not exactly a province known for really giving a crap what the law thinks or what the rest of the country thinks. That's one of the things I semi-respect them for, but at the same time, when they're stepping on individual rights as they do with Bill 21 or with this vaccination plan, I'm not so supportive of their stubborn attitude. Before we get further, I'm going to talk about our sponsor, and that is Bitcoin Well. Bitcoin Well, these guys are a service. They help you buy Bitcoin. I mean, the name kind of speaks for itself. And they're a service provider. They don't hold on to your Bitcoin. So that's one of the things they want to make really clear with you. Like if you're just getting into the cryptocurrency world, you're checking it out, you want to buy, these guys facilitate it, but it's yours. You control it. It's in your wallet all the time. I guess there's a lot of these guys out there who it's a custodial exchange, which means actually they kind of buy it on your behalf and sit on it. You don't necessarily trust that. You don't have control of that. Bitcoin Well doesn't have control of your coin. They just help you buy it, sell it, use it for a number of things. They're the first publicly traded Bitcoin ATM company out there. They've had ATMs all through the West where you can put money into your Bitcoin account. They're great. Check them out, bitcoinwell.com. I'll talk a little more about them later with some of the stuff they do, because for people curious about cryptocurrencies, these guys are quite something. I like them. So what's got me triggered today? Due process has me triggered today. We're back into legality and those sorts of issues. Now, I've gotten my fair share of traffic tickets over the years. I've never contested a single one of them. I'm always guilty. I mean, I was speeding. I rolled that stop sign, whatever. I was nailed in some ridiculous fishing holes occasionally, where they set up in a spot where there really wasn't a safety issue. They just wanted to get speeding tickets. But the bottom line is I should have been paying attention. Shouldn't have got caught. That said, I don't want to give up my right to contest a traffic ticket in court if I feel that I was innocent. Now, Alberta is planning to change the system into one where I'm guilty until proven innocent. They really are reversing the complete onus. And they're going to be making it expensive and difficult to prove your innocence. And citizens are only going to have 1 week to respond to traffic tickets when this new law comes in if they want to challenge them. Then they got to pay a non-refundable fee of up to $150. And you're not going to go before a judge. You're going to go before an adjudicator. And this adjudicator won't have the ability to reduce your ticket, say, as judges often do, or revise it, maybe take some of the demerits off. It's a gamble going for a judge. They could increase your fine if you really tick them off when you go there. But that's what you can do. Now, these adjudicators, all they can do is dismiss the entire thing or leave it whole. So there's no middle ground. And the ability to plead before a judge is essential. There could be any number of extenuating circumstances that led to the traffic violation, if indeed there was one. The person being charged might be in a dire circumstance personally and could be requesting the mercy of the court in order to have the payment period extended, or maybe they have no case and still wind up with a ticket. It's important that they have the ability, though, to make their case in any circumstance. A person might find themselves with both a traffic fine and a fee of $150 if their plea fails. I mean, you're getting punished for trying to defend yourself on top of you being punished for apparently breaking a traffic law. Could you imagine such a scheme in criminal courts, telling defendants, hey, you're automatically guilty unless you cough up a non-refundable fee in order to defend yourself, okay? It's essential we have the ability to defend ourselves unimpeded by fees and barriers, whether it's a murder charge or a jaywalking ticket. The problem is we've given up much of what we consider to be rights. We've allowed the government to declare all sorts of actions to be privileges that we can only enjoy with the permission of the state. It isn't a right to go to a restaurant or any other form of business. Thus, the government can impose limitations on your patronage of those establishments. The ability to travel is no longer considered an inviolate right. Attending weddings and funerals is now a privilege. The state can determine how many people are allowed to attend if they allow the ceremony to happen at all. Kids' sports, that's a privilege. In-person learning in a public school, that's a privilege. The list goes on and on. The state keeps taking away our ability to freely do things, and we keep complacently rolling over and letting them do it. So is it really any surprise that the government feels bold enough to take away our ability to defend ourselves in court? I mean, remember, driving isn't a right. It's a privilege. So that's why they're not infringing your rights. They're just cracking down on your privilege. I'm all for reducing the size and cost of government. And I understand that some of these things are going to be expensive, but rights come at a cost. Traffic courts sees hundreds of thousands of cases per year and loads of challenges. And a lot of them are petty and realistic. Well, or unrealistic. But too damn bad. Justice isn't cheap. There's some things we can have to spend some money on. There's plenty of areas where the government can reduce spending without reducing our ability to get a day in court for traffic violations. Our right to due process is being taken away for no reason aside from being inconvenient for the government to deal with. And that's not good enough. Traffic fines, demerits, and license suspensions can seriously harm some people. They can lose their employment or at least have their standard of living reduced. I mean, I believe in personal responsibility. I'm not opposed to traffic fines in principle or enforcement. And I understand that law enforcement officers are imperfect. We know damn well that some traffic fines are handed out incorrectly. The frog and water analogy applies excellently here. That's the one where you just keep cranking the heat up, and the frog boils to death before it realizes what was going on. The state loves taking as much power as possible while reducing the ability for citizens to push back against it as much as possible. It's just the nature of the beast. The state wants to grow. Don't dismiss this move to take away our right to due process as being a small thing. It's big. And I don't think for a second the government's going to stop there. I mean, the state will take as many rights from citizens as possible until citizens finally stand up for themselves. This docile and apologetic nature of Canadians, and that's what it is, it's not a virtue. It's a handicap, and it's embarrassing. And it's allowing the government to incrementally infringe upon every right we have. So, hey, stand up, guys, while you still can, because the longer you let them take your rights little by little, the harder it is to do so. Okay, and Anne Gagnon, how to do it? Yeah, that's the tougher part of the issue, isn't it? We got to start firing them. Call your elected officials. Get out there. I know people say it doesn't work. Well, you know what? I don't know about that. We don't fire them nearly often enough. Did Trudeau get fired? 3 elections in a row? No, he didn't. In Alberta, I mean, Kenny's getting low in support. We've got to turn over governments over and over, and it might be a painful process, but at least we got the means to do it for now. But if they fear for their jobs, if they really think we're going to stand up and kick their asses out of their seats, they'll start paying attention to us. Staying home, getting apathetic isn't going to help. It's not easy, but giving up is even worse. So let's check in, though, on other things to see what's triggering today. We got Dave Naylor, our news editor for the Western Standard. You can find the stories he's doing on westernstandardonline.com. Dave, what is topping our news today?
Good morning, Cory. I thought the first couple of minutes of your show today were some of the best work you've ever done.
Well, thanks. I'm just looking at me.
Put it in the
is enough for a lot of people.
Yeah, Silent Movie Hall of Fame or something like
That's
that.
Right.
Yeah, we got some good stuff already on the website this morning, Cory. We're leading off with the this very emotional story about a 4-year-old boy called Jack Ferguson. He's from Kelowna, and 3 months ago he was discovered to have leukemia. So the family flew to Vancouver, and we're staying at the Ronald McDonald House in Vancouver while he went for his treatments. He's got to be there for 6 months. So thank goodness Ronald McDonald House is there for families, and they're not faced with the the possibility of 6 months hotel bills in Vancouver. But the family found out this week that they're being evicted from the Ronald McDonald House because they're not vaccinated. So the terrible PR for McDonald's booting this 4-year-old kid out. Since the story broke yesterday, the family had raised $3,000 in a GoFundMe site. When the story broke yesterday, it immediately went up to $50,000. And after the story was broadcast on Fox News last night, it went up to $150,000. So our reporter Mel has talked to the father, Austin, this morning, and he says, we've got all the money, our needs are taken care of, and they're going to set the rest aside for other families in need. Good on them. And they're also getting some good news in that the Easter Seals House, which is just down the road, has said they will take them in, Cory. So hopefully this is a story with a happy ending, and little Jack will go back to Kelowna in 3 months' time, completely cancer-free.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, just an upside to follow on that. I mean, it's good to see if we stand up and we do things and we make noise, we can change things. We can make a difference. We don't have to just take it.
Yeah, it certainly always pays to complain in this country, it seems. Other stuff that's already up on the website this morning are Federal Health Minister Duclos. I always call him Clouseau, as Inspector Clouseau, the bumbling detective. He's talking about mandatory vaccinations, and he says it's okay if governments do it with the well-meaning of citizens on their side. They say mandatory vaccinations must be benevolent. So yeah, that'll thrill a lot of the people who aren't vaccinated. There was a poll out today, Cory, on the vax tax that's being brought into Quebec, a special tax on the unvaccinated to help pay for the healthcare system there. Unsurprisingly, opposition to the tax is highest in Alberta. But in fairness, the majority of Albertans did support it. It was 54 to 46%. Across the country, 60% of Canadians support the idea of the vax tax. So it looks like if governments want to bring in mandatory vaccines and vax tax and all that sort of good stuff, they've got the support of their population. Speaking of the vax tax, the NDP has come out and said they're against it. They want to use more education to increase the vaccination rate. And Cory, you probably noticed the last few times you've gone to the grocery store, prices are way up, and gasoline prices are way up, and you're looking to buy a house prices have gone way up. Well, these things Canadians have been living with for months and months seems to be finally coming to the attention of MPs, and the Finance Committee yesterday decided they were going to hold hearings on inflation. So I guess we can see what harebrained ideas they come up with to fight inflation, Cory. So those. Oh, I forgot one of the other big news items of the morning is Scott Moe, Premier of Saskatchewan. Yesterday, he went on a bit of a Twitter tirade on how COVID restrictions don't work and they cause more harm than anything. Well, less than 24 hours later, he's tweeting out that he's positive. He has tested positive for COVID, and says he feels okay, but he'll be working from home and self-isolating for the next 5 days. Yeah, so those are the big ones of the morning so far, Cory.
Right on, Dave. Well, I hope that Premier Moe is okay. I'm certain he probably will be. I mean, most people these days, it seems to be just something that lays them up for a couple of days and they're fine afterwards. We'll be watching it. So thanks for the check-in, and a reminder to everybody, go to westernstandardonline.com and you'll see Dave's stories, and you'll see Melanie's stories, and Eva, and even my columns and rantings on there. So thanks for checking in, and we will talk to you again later, Dave.
Yeah, Corey, just want to give you the heads up. Mel is currently working on a story now, which will be of interest to your viewers. The European Union, along with the World Health Organization, have issued a joint statements saying booster shots may be problematic. Booster shots may cause your immunity system to basically become not as useful as they once were. So Mel's pouring through that report right now, and we'll have that story up on the site ASAP.
Great. Well, keep watching the site, guys. And yeah, it's interesting to see things changing as we go here on this issue. So yeah, there's the check-in there. Thanks, Dave. And Anne, yeah, I know you're talking about, Anne Gagnon was mentioning a poll on CTV. It says differently that 80% of people are against the tax. These are online polls that they put. I mean, you got to think of them similarly to when I put a Twitter poll out there. I bet you if I tweeted about it, I could get a couple thousand respondents and they would all say that it's terrible. The poll that Dave's referring to, though, in the story was an actual poll done by CTV, using a pollster through phoning and perhaps it was internet. I don't know the basis. You'll see it on the full story online, but it wasn't just one of those internet ones. And it's depressing. It's frustrating. We're seeing the tyranny of the majority really in reality here, that sure, most people have chosen to get vaccinated, but yet somehow they suddenly feel comfortable in feeling that the state should be able to force that upon everybody else. And it's an awful state of things. And it's one of the many reasons I am not always terribly proud of being Canadian. One of the many reasons I'd like to change the entire makeup of Canada. It's that general attitude. We really got to change. Individual rights are more important than the pleasure of the majority. I wish people would learn to understand that. It's historically, there's never been worse things that happen than when the majority of citizens in the nation pick out a minority and decide to blame them for all their problems. There are many, many historical examples of when that's happened, and it has never, ever ended well. So I'm going to be coming up with Derek Fromm pretty quickly. I'll talk about a sponsor first. But yeah, Derek's a lawyer. He's been working hard, as I said, on a lot of freedom issues. He's a freedom-loving sort of guy. And I want to get somebody, with more legal grounding to talk to me about what Quebec is looking to do, because it just seems beyond the pale with this again, setting aside and taxing people based on their medical status. See if this is workable, if possible, or if there's ways to fight it. It'll be an interesting conversation. So before I get to Derek, though, I do want to talk about the Canada Shooting Sports Association. That's one of our sponsors. These guys, Derek was talking about them on the pipeline yesterday. He's a member of them, has been for a long time. They're for firearm owners. I mean, they're a resource. They provide all sorts of things, whether instruction or even just guides to where there's going to be trade shows happening where you can pick up firearms, trade them, that sort of thing, just admire them. They promote the safe utilization of firearms, as most Canadians who take part in them do, whether you want to collect them or go hunting or do target shooting. And we need somebody to push back for our sake, because there's a government that wants to take away that right. They want to take away your property. They want to take away your ability to use, enjoy, do whatever you want with, as long as it's safe and not bothering your neighbors, firearms. So check these guys out. Their website is cssa-cila.org. Or just look up Canada Shooting Sports Association and check them out. They've got some legal challenges going on right now on behalf of firearm owners as well. They're trying to stand up for you. And if you get a membership with them, you can help them help you. And that's what I was talking about. People ask, what do we do when the government intrudes on us? Well, this is an opportunity. This is one of the things. We got to organize. We got to stand up for ourselves. So don't just sit back and enjoy your firearms and get upset and then be shocked if the government comes in and takes them later. If you didn't defend yourself now, they're going to get it later. All right, let's bring Derek in. Speaking of individual rights, I've been ranting long enough. Let's get somebody more nuanced to talk about it. How you doing, Derek?
I'm doing well.
Good, good. So you might have heard in a bit of my preamble, and then when I was emailing what I want to talk about, like this plan to tax unvaccinated people in Quebec. I mean, I guess to start with, on a couple of levels, I'm concerned with the Charter and the Health Act. Is this legal?
Well, I'm not sure it's ever been tried before. So deciding right now whether or not it's legal is maybe jumping the gun. A court needs to decide that for us. But my inclination, reading case law and reading the statutes involved, the ones that you've mentioned, and also our original Constitution Act, the British North America Act, 1867. I think it strains my legal senses that this is fully compliant plan that Quebec is bringing forward.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a number of things. I spoke with a gentleman from the Quebec's Canadian Taxpayers Federation the other day too. One of the things he mentioned too, this would mean that the Quebec health system is going to start sharing your personal health records with the tax collection agencies. I mean, that's yet another level where your privacy is going to get infringed upon, and it's going into agencies that shouldn't have anything to do with your health.
This is a much more complicated situation than I think they anticipated. So first off, I mean, the Canada Health Act is sort of an important place to start. I think we can start there. So the Canada Health Act was an act that was brought in by the federal government, basically to force provinces to do certain things with their healthcare system. So the feds for a long time have over collected tax money and then remit it back to the provinces sort of piecemeal. And so this act is really a sort of bit of federal extortion to make sure that provinces do what the federal government wants them to do with their Healthcare Act. So there's a number of things in that Canada Health Act, and it's of itself, I would say, it's of questionable constitutional status, but it's never really been fully challenged in court, and I don't think any politician in this country has or ever will have this sort of political capital to challenge this and truly make provinces free to make their own healthcare decisions, at least not for some time. But what the Act does, some of the things the Act does, is it says extra billing and user fees are verboten. And it doesn't, you don't get penalized if you're a province that does these things. You just get less money to make up the difference. And then there's certain program criteria, like for instance, your program criteria, the object of the Act is, I'm going to read it, so I'm going to have to look away for a second. The primary object of the Canada Health Act is to provide, protect, promote, and restore the physical and mental well-being of residents of Canada, and to facilitate reasonable access to healthcare services without financial or other barriers. So you can see that right away that the whole purpose of that act sort of flies in the face of what Quebec is proposing. Quebec is proposing to deny access under certain conditions and to impose financial conditions on that. And what's the purpose? Well, that's protect the healthcare system. Well, that sort of reasoning is completely foreign to this. This act is about promoting, protecting, and those sorts of things of the health of individual Canadians, not of some system that we've created. Very important difference. Now, there's some other things in the Canada Health Act that are very key. There's 5 principles. They cover things like the public administration, portability, accessibility, but 2 are very important for this discussion. That's universality and comprehensiveness. And so, for instance, universality, that means that it covers everything and everyone is covered. Well, that's exactly the opposite of what Quebec's doing. Now, this act was never drafted with these particular circumstances in mind. So, of course, clever lawyers can come up with all sorts of reasons why, it doesn't violate the act because we're in a pandemic and the federal government never anticipated this. And comprehensiveness, well, it's supposed to cover everything that's an insured service. So if you break your leg and you go to the hospital and you happen to test positive for COVID, incidentally in Quebec, are they not going to treat your broken leg if you're not vaccinated? This seems to be what they're saying. Or do you actually have to be dying of COVID itself? And it's you're admitted to the hospital because you stayed at home, you're having trouble breathing, and then you get pulled into the hospital, and then you get fined. Well, I just don't see how this can work and mesh with the Canada Health Act. But that's not the only problem. If we go back to 1867, the British North America Act, now the Constitution Act 1867, that in the jurisdictional portions of that act, sections 91, 92, provinces and federal governments or the provinces and the federal government are basically given their areas of jurisdiction. And the federal government has this very broad taxing power, very broad. They can raise money for any purpose in any mode they want. It's really quite surprising. But provinces are restricted. And they're restricted to direct taxation for the purposes of raising revenue for a provincial purpose. Well, what's a provincial purpose? Well, provincial purpose is the remainder of those things listed in Section 92. So things like insane asylums, local works, hospitals, property and civil rights in the province, those sorts of things. But I think it's a sham. I think it's a sham to say that Quebec here is trying to protect their healthcare system. And I think it's a sham that they are doing this to offset costs that are being driven up by people remaining unvaccinated. I have not seen any evidence of that being the case. In fact, the evidence seems to be, at best, muddled that this is going on. What Quebec seems to be doing is to be putting in a tax to incentivize taking a vaccine. That is not a provincial purpose. That is contrary to Section 92.2 of the Constitution Act. Quebec can't do that. And this is the same sort of argument that was being made in the courts regarding the carbon tax. And arguably, a province, a provincial government, can't bring in a carbon tax if the purpose of that carbon tax is to promote the use of less carbon-intensive fuels. That's not a provincial purpose. They can't do it. So that's yet another problem. It's arguably unconstitutional just on jurisdictional grounds. Now, lastly, obviously, the charter comes into play, as you mentioned. Life, liberty, security of the person. There is absolutely no moral or legal grounds in any of the law that I've ever read on the Constitution in Section 7 to deny someone access to life-saving medication or life-saving treatment when they've been guaranteed it by their government and they've been prevented from acquiring it outside the government monopoly. There is certainly no legal authority for treating a person that callously and that immorally. And the Constitution would certainly recognize that. In fact, it doesn't even have to rise to the level of life-threatening. Security of the person includes both psychological and your physical integrity. And arguably, the irony of all of this is that Section 7 of the Charter, security of the person, actually prohibits the government from doing precisely this thing, because when the government comes at you with what is actually a weapon, a syringe, if a criminal lunged at a police officer on the street with a syringe, that police officer would be fully within his rights to take extreme measures to protect him or herself. When the government does the same thing to you, it is, in my opinion, an infringement of your right to security of the person. And so by doing this, not only is the government illegally and unconstitutionally denying healthcare to these folks, but they will actually be doing something much more egregious. And that's being that dark alley perp lunging at people in Quebec and saying, inject this. And so this is very problematic. But of course, to get anything to be different, if those polls that Mr. Naylor was talking about previously are true, that's 60%. And frankly, I don't believe that. I believe that the devil is in the details with those polls. As you pointed out with a Twitter poll, you drive the result by the way it's questions asked and also by where it's asked. And I think our legacy polling companies are dinosaurs that need to be put to bed. They've been wrong so blatantly, so often. It seems to me that they are hired often to drive public opinion rather than report on it. But that's an aside. But if let's take that as accurate, 60%. If the public won't scream about this, and no government's going to scream about this, because the Canada Health Act is the federal act, and from my understanding is that our Prime Minister has already sort of tacitly said, okay, well, Quebec can do what it wants, kind of his knee-jerk response to everything that Quebec does. So the federal government's not going to enforce its own act against Quebec. It's not going to start denying these transfers for healthcare. Well, who's going to stand up for Quebecers? The governments aren't standing up for Quebecers. Politicians aren't. It's not going to make it to court. So what's going to happen? This is the sort of problem we see with Canadian constitutional law and the way that we do things in this country, is that we create these sort of perverse incentives, and we end up with these, quite frankly, absurd results. The Charter of Rights is supposed to protect us, as you mentioned before, from those moments of the tyranny of the majority. supposed to protect individual flourishing, individual autonomy and dignity, and all those wonderful things that judges say when there really aren't very high stakes. But now that the stakes are high, Canadians actually don't believe those things, it looks like. And we've just been playing a game and saying the right things for years. And it disturbs and disgusts me. And so when I see the Canada Health Act, I think, yeah, this is, if I were the federal government, this is a clear violation of what I believe at least is the spirit of the act, if not the letter, probably the letter also. And I would start denying Quebec the purse string. So I would be holding it back because I think it's a clear violation of that act. I would also say it's quite likely and arguably a violation of the British North America Act, Canadian Constitution Act 1867. Quebec can't impose a tax like this for the purpose of incentivizing uptake of a vaccination. And finally, Section 7 of the Charter is very much on point, as is Section 15, equality, denying people access to medical coverage on the basis of treatment that they've chosen not to take, a treatment they've chosen not to take, which is fully within their rights not to take, and then denying them access to the healthcare system that they've paid for, and they cannot purchase healthcare outside of that system. That's problematic. It's a trap.
Yes. So I mean, we know there's a lot of, a lawyer going in to challenge this is going to have a big stack of points to go on. But quickly, what steps would a lawyer be able to take? I mean, would you seek an injunction quickly? I mean, we know the courts take forever. This pandemic could be done by the time this is resolved. And meanwhile, people have already been punished. We've just got a couple minutes left. But what is the chain of events we think might unfold here? Well,
if this were happening here in Alberta, you'd have to speak to a lawyer right away. And the facts would have to be pretty good. We're fighting an uphill battle here. The public is generally against us, and the establishment is against us on these sorts of issues. And so you'd have to find the right plaintiff. You'd have to know the details. Like, for instance, if you do get admitted for a broken leg, are you going to be denied treatment if you're unvaccinated? Don't know. I haven't heard those details. Is it only if you're actually in severe respiratory distress? So we need to know the level of details, figure out who the plaintiffs might be, file a statement of claim, and then go for injunctive relief as soon as possible. I think the case law on this is almost as clear as it gets. But if you don't get your day in court, the government wins. And if he's just looking for 2 months more of pressure to incentivize uptake of the vaccine, which is what I highly suspect is going on, then it's going to be the sort of guerrilla tactics where you make a lunge and then faint away. He's going to float this out there. He might never do it. I don't know. Might never do it. 2 weeks from now, he might do a little more saber rattling. Many more people might go out and get vaccinated against their will, involuntarily. And at the end of the day, he might win. He might say, "Oh, look, we didn't need to do that anyway." Nothing makes that illegal that I can see. There's no remedy, because at the end of the day, I think the courts would turn a blind eye and say, look, you voluntarily did it, even though it was under this sort of compulsion and extreme circumstances like this, when you're like, what's going on? Am I going to be able to go to the hospital? If I'm unvaccinated, and if I'm pregnant, for instance, and I have a complication during pregnancy, am I going to die? Is my baby going to die? That's the sort of uncertainty he's going to bank on, and to drive this. And so I think a legal challenge is he doesn't care, because it's not going to, and the lawyers will drag their feet, procedural delays. They won't see a courtroom for months. And when it does, the issue will be moot. So this is a problem we have in this country.
Well, you painted a bleak picture, but I mean, I appreciate just the unvarnished view from somebody who works in the field on what we may be looking forward to here in the weeks and months to come. And it's just a sad outlook, and it's sad seeing how willingly Canadians are taking it. But, well, we can't give up. We keep pushing back. We do what we can. So thank you for, the work you do, and for coming on to talk to us about today. Where can we find more information about what you're up to these days, Derek?
Well, every once in a while, I'm featured in the Western Standard. You'll notice I deal with Melanie occasionally, and I do write once in a while, less lately because work is busy. You can find the law firm where I'm at in Airdrie at wkalawyers.ca. We currently have a number of very interesting cases going on. We're currently suing AHS. We're suing the city of Calgary. And we're setting what we hope are positive precedents for freedom and for individual liberties, and also the return of sanity into some of this. And we hope to make some leeway in that. You can find me on Twitter, Derek James Fromm, and always happy to interact with people there too.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on, Derek. Maybe the next time we talk, it'll be talking about a positive development in the court somewhere. All right. So that was Derek Fromm. And yeah, just, as I said, a good, blunt, unvarnished view. We're not here to talk about all roses and sunshine, I'm afraid. A lot of negative things. But still, people are pushing, people are fighting, people are trying. And victories can still come. They can still happen. The worst thing we can do is give up. That's always the worst thing we can do. Now, speaking of getting out from under the government yoke, I'm going to talk about our sponsor again, Bitcoin Well. Cryptocurrencies, this gets you away from government-controlled currencies, from central bank currencies. I mean, you can't rely on government for anything. We can see right now, the majority of people perhaps in Canada, and definitely the majority in government, do not have your interests in mind, and they're the ones controlling the currency. So if you want to get away from them, you want to get your funds, your wealth, the stuff you've earned into your own hands, check out bitcoinwell.com. These guys will help you into that world. They hold seminars. They do things to show you how it works. They make sure you are always in control of your Bitcoin wallet. That's the point of it. They actually have in-person white glove service, free one-on-one consultations in Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, and Winnipeg. And then anywhere else in Canada, they'll do it virtually. They can help you get everything set up, make sure you understand it, because it's a nebulous world. It's different, it's new. And these guys can help you take control of your wealth and do it right and know how to do it. So bitcoinwell.com, check these guys out. And I think you'll like them. Now, you know what? I want to get on something a little brighter before we get on to some other things. I love the internet. I love it for a lot of reasons. It's a great resource. It's got a lot of negative things and so on. But one of the things I love are, and as Nico's been putting up, I love Twitter, at Cory B. Morgan, if you really want to get into the scraps and fights with me or whatever. That's where my playground is, and I find a lot of neat things. And I dig into the ugly bowels of the internet now and then too. But I love memes, I love pictures, I love things that give us a good laugh, even if it's got a political basis. So if we pull one up, I spotted one the other day and I threw it on Twitter of Justin Trudeau. This thing was just brilliant, and you can't help but laugh at it. Now, if people had seen, there was another weird one. This was a meme of a meme. There was a thing made of that you can see that was Ernie from Sesame Street at one time, and it had this real aged, strange look on it. It was kind of a bizarre meme. And now somebody's taken it and put Justin Trudeau's crying face on it with that Zippy the Pinhead sort of look up top. And I couldn't help but laugh my head off at it and share it on Twitter and with some others. And it's just a way to lighten things up. We had political cartoons, we had things like that, we had memes. And now Trudeau's closest advisor, his best friend, Gerald Butts, somebody, okay, that's Bert, not Ernie. Yes, I get them mixed up. Thank you, Cheryl. We got Gerald Butts, and of course, somebody went straight to utilizing his name to play with the meme there and put a butt on his face, and it works out quite well. I got a good chuckle of it, okay? So I like sharing these things on here too, and I'm asking, actually, for those who are watching and listening, check it out. Share your memes with me, political ones, non-political. Let's get some stuff we can pull up on the show now and then to laugh about, just have a chuckle, take it lightly, and have some fun with it. Email them to me at cmorgan@westernstandardonline.com or send them to me on Twitter. Let's have some fun with these things within reasonable good taste. I mean, there's some pretty horrible things out there. Actually, since we're on that, Len, I'm not opening any more emails from you with attachments on them, okay? I appreciate it. I'm flattered. No more dick pics. That's it. Everybody else, you can send me stuff. Not you, Len. And hey, I know, again, I'm flattered. Your poetry is amazing. You're really a soft-hearted, romantic at heart sort of guy. Very compelling. It's just not the way I go. For a bear, you put out just almost heartbreaking sort of poetry. What I will suggest you do, send that poetry, find the right guy, get it out there, start that spark. You've got it in you, Len. You can do that. Get that interest. Get it back and forth. You'll find the right one. And when it's time, send him that dick pic. I mean, you're gifted, I'll give you that. It's just wasted on a straight guy like me. So either way, Len, leave those out. Everybody else, by all means, send me memes, send me pictures, send me neat stuff, and we'll share it on here, and we can have a good time. You know, we can break up the show a little bit, lighten things up. We don't always have to be sour. There's a little bit of good news, I guess. The government is slackened off a little bit. We were looking at bigger supply chain challenges, I guess, because they were going to force Canadian truckers coming back across the border to quote. You can't make your money in doing that. You know, you're going to sit for 5 days or 2 weeks or whatever the quarantine per day is these days. And meanwhile, we aren't getting any goods transported across our country. I mean, it's integral to keep that moving. It sounds like the government backed off on that. We're seeing that on a lot of fronts. The governments are backing off. They're realizing that they can't afford to fire 10% of the workforce here and there and everywhere, all over the place. You know, we can't do it. I mean, it's sad that the government kept trying, but at least reality is setting in. We're seeing health authorities, all sorts of others, reducing quarantine requirements and letting people get back to work and pushing it. You know what? The world isn't ending. It's going quite well, actually. So, you know, getting on it, let's get back to COVID. And I got some good news, bad news going on, I guess, in a way. Omicron. And I got a tweet from David Staple in there. It's going to come up. And it's really sweeping Alberta. It's going all over the place, but it's not really harming people. I mean, the numbers, we're getting some of the numbers. 100,000 people currently infected with Omicron. That's an estimate. According to Hinshaw, actually said it was 10 times. It could be as much as 580,000 is what they think. Out of all of them, 11 of them are in the ICU. That's the ones they've tested and determined to have Omicron. 66 in the hospital. If 11 out of 500,000 is what ends up in the ICU, this isn't a problem. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a statistician. You don't have to be a specialist to realize this is the common cold. And the doomsayers are losing it. They're saying we got to lock down. They're saying we got to shut down. The unions are saying we got to do circuit breakers. No. We've got good news. Let's talk about the good news for a change. Again, I've talked about that before. I turn on the CTV. I got to quit torturing myself with that. They doom and gloom and the world is ending, and they bring on that moron, Dr. Vipond, all the time. I actually saw him on the news again last night. I will give credit, for the first time I saw him on the news, he didn't have his scrubs on. I'm thinking it was just an unanticipated interview, because normally he has his scrubs and his stethoscope, and he lives in his weird little pretend world of wanting to stand up for people. If he really was a doctor who cared, he'd be talking about the real facts that we're getting right now. So we got Dr. Rochelle Walensky of the Center for Disease Control. You know, these, again, I'm not talking about fringe doctors. You know, I'm not talking about natural.com news or any of that. This is the CDC in Atlanta, and it's saying the Omicron's been studied, 53% less risk of hospitalization. Then we got to remember, even with the Delta, your risk of going to hospital if you were a healthy person, extremely small. 74% less risk of ICU and 91% less risk of death. This is a mild variant, and we're doing all right. This is good news. Let's talk about that. And yeah, it's much more transmissible. They're talking about over 1 million cases a day being found in the United States. So much similar to the Alberta numbers. This is getting around. It's going all over the place, but it's not harming us overall, thankfully. And I mean, we should be shouting that from the rooftops, but instead, doom, gloom, fear, projections of terrible times, idiots in unions. And there's a lot of idiots in unions. I got them all worked up yesterday because I called them a bunch of lazy bums for wanting the circuit breaker. But it's true. Not every worker is a lazy bum. I understand that. Just most of your leaders are. And idiots like Gil McGowan. Remember, all you union guys, you better stand up for yourselves too, because that money coming off your check every day is going to an ass clown like Gil McGowan to go out there and talk about shutting down Alberta. We see that guys like him who talk about shutting it down are guys with guaranteed incomes. You know, they aren't running a business. They aren't paying other people. They don't, sit at home and live on CERB. They've got guaranteed six-figure incomes. They're just fine. But the rest of us pay for it. And Gil wants that. The unions want that. Thankfully, the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, they've been pretty weak. I mean, they're pretty tight in with the city of Calgary. not always a good business advocate. Even them are speaking up like, no, we can't lock down. We can't do these circuit breakers. This is foolishness. This is not a good idea. Let's not do this. So we're getting some better movement, and we're getting movement pushing back, and I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. It's going to be part of my rant, because there's people, they got a psychological thing. They've learned to love the pandemic. They want it to stay. They want to keep in it, and it makes some of them feel important. I think that's part of why old NDP Joe Vipond wants to keep everybody scared too. He's just another doctor. If this thing is gone, they're not going to talk to him on the news anymore. We got thousands of doctors. Why is it that clown's the one they always talk to? For one, I think he doesn't actually do a hell of a lot of doctoring. And for another, it shows that slant in the media. They want the fear-spreading doom and gloom doctor. They want to bring him on there to keep up with that crap. It gets tiresome. So let's see. Clinton should be here pretty soon, but we got more to talk about on the way there. And yeah, something's hitting the news a lot. City Hall, they're trying to resurrect the Flames deal. Here we go again. I guess they've struck a committee that's going to be a third party because there is no trust left anymore. Gondek torpedoed it. We're finding out from the other council members that she didn't consult them. She just acted on her own. When they had the chance, council members were saying, before the 31st, the hard deadline, maybe we can salvage this. Gondek made sure that there was no effort to salvage it. Now it's gone. Now it's blown up. And she's thinking we can revitalize it. Maybe. Some people are saying maybe she's got another idea, her own little monument to herself in mind that she wants to start building. It wouldn't shock me. But there's people saying the Flames will never leave. We can still keep pushing them. Really? These same morons were saying the Flames would never back out of this deal. They said no to it. Don't ever say never. Winnipeg thought that the Jets were never going to leave them as well. There's always things change, always different opportunities. We heard that too with people when they punish and attack Alberta's energy sector, the oil field, things like that. Don't worry, those oil companies will never leave. They love it over here. They're never going to go. They do go. When Stelmach went and meddled around with the resource revenues, royalties, there's the term for it. That was a big deal back when Stelmach was in power. And even though energy prices were high, we were actually seeing energy companies bailing out of Alberta because they will leave. They do. It's a world market. So if you want those Flames to stay, we can't go working under the pretense that they will never leave. They might. And, they're a business. It'll be their decision. As it is, though, we've got a big problem. We got a giant blight. I mean, anybody who knows Calgary, you look north of that Saddle Dome, it's just a sea of parking lots. There's nothing there. They've been tearing down all those. I mean, it was never pretty houses up there in Victoria Park anyways. They were old boarding houses and rickety things, but they've been tearing them down for years in anticipation of some time eventually developing in there. Well, now you've got a wasteland. A wasteland that comes up to the east side of Calgary, their vaunted East Village that God knows how many tax incentives have helped develop over there, and people still aren't moving in droves. I've said, maybe we should just set up a shanty town there, get some corrugated tin, some wild dogs, throw it out there, leave it as an open zone, let the guys push their shopping carts and live there. It'll get them off of the transit system. They need somewhere to go. There's nothing else going in those lots. We've got a city with a dead and dying downtown. This is a big problem. And we're not sure how to deal with it. Again, I wasn't so big on the whole idea of having the government in on an arena deal in the first place. It's not their business. But once you're in, you got to keep the deal. And now the bigger fallout that we can't measure, but we won't be able to see is you can't trust this city to partner with them any longer. Like they're not trustworthy. So why would you do business with them? So we got Calgary Economic Development. That's a terrible failure. I mean, they've been given $100 million. They've had years to work on it, to try and bring business into downtown Calgary, make it better. And so far, there's been virtually no indication of any of these coming in and staying. Rocket Space was a joke. They made a little coffee shop. Some of these other things. And I mean, we've got to have council talk about what are the things we could do to bring business in, reduce regulation. I mean, Gondek's loony climate emergency, well, that's part of what killed the arena deal. I mean, how many windmills per square foot is every new building going to have now? How many solar panels are they going to have to stick on there? I mean, that shoots your costs of operation and construction up highly. I mean, it puts it through the roof. You can't ignore these things. And businesses look at these things when they're coming in. So this city has really got to reevaluate where it's going. I'm not sure where Clinton's gotten to. Hopefully he pops in pretty soon. I'll take a moment to talk about our sponsor again for just a second here. The Canada Shooting Sports Association. These guys, they, again, they're standing up for you. CSSA-CILA.org. That's the website. I see Nico's got it in the bottom left of the screen there. These guys are standing up for your rights to use firearms responsibly. You know, the crazed anti-firearms people, again, it gets back to that Canadian attitude, right? Well, I don't need it, so nobody else needs it either. You know, similar to the vaccine. I got my vaccine, so everybody else has to get vaccinated. Like, why can't you just have differences? You don't like firearms? Fine. Don't buy one. It's not that complicated. But don't say that I shouldn't have one, or my neighbors shouldn't have one, or my kids shouldn't have them. It's up to them. But that attitude, we want to take away the rights of the rest. So the Canada Shooting Sports Association is standing up for you on your behalf and making sure you can continue to have that right to enjoy and utilize firearms responsibly. So check them out. Again, as I said, Google Canada Shooting Sports Association. All kinds of resources. They got a conference in Las Vegas they're going to be taking part in, actually, with a bunch of other firearm owners discussing things such as that. Check them out. They're a great sponsor. They're a great group. Take out a membership with them. Okay, I see Clinton in the lobby there, which is great. So we're going to be talking a bit. And this is one of the things that gets everybody wound up. I get wound up about it, was electric vehicles. But it is where things are going. I think a lot of what we're wound up on isn't necessarily the vehicle of themselves. It's how government's going about promoting them, or as we often feel, pushing them. But still, we have room for discussions, and it is where markets are growing and markets are going to a degree. So Clinton watches that with a lot of interest all the time. He's from out in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and it's great just to get other perspectives in here. We don't need my crazed Alberta guest list, echo chamber going on all the time. It's good to get Clinton here now and then to break things up, and it's been a while since I've had him on. So let's bring him in and see how we're doing. How you doing out there, Clinton?
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to chatting with you and hearing from your viewers.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's been a while, I mean, I had that live show for a while, and then it kind of went on hiatus, and now we've rebooted, and it's going really good. So glad to be able to get you back in to check in with us.
Excellent. Yeah, so first of all, thanks for bringing me in. So for your viewers that may not know, there's a study that came out in the last 24 hours that shows that electric vehicles are going to overtake fossil fuel powered vehicles in Europe in less than 3 years' time. So if we look at the data from December of 2021, if we look at Sweden, for example, over 60% of all new passenger vehicles sold were electric. Germany is approaching 40%. Norway is above 90%. The Netherlands is somewhere between 40 and 50%. So we can sort of see what the tea leaves are telling us. So then the question becomes, if we know this is happening, how does this affect Western Canada and Canada generally speaking, and what can we do in order to continue to leverage an economic advantage that will keep Western Canadians and Canadians from Newfoundland to BC and all parts in between, working in those kinds of things. So, one of the good news stories for Western Canada when it comes to the international electric vehicle revolution is that Alberta, this is an old study that I'm about to recite to you from a number of years ago. But Alberta has at least 11 million tons of lithium, which is currently resting in the bottom of tailings ponds at various oil sands operations. So why is that important? Well, we know that lithium is one of the, as I like to call, one of the key ingredients in the electric vehicle battery. So I argue that Alberta should be an exporter of all of this lithium. And we know that there's significantly larger deposits of lithium in Alberta. It's just that we haven't really taken the time to look for it. If we look at the province of Saskatchewan, specifically the Athabasca Basin, they have tremendous volumes of cobalt. So why is cobalt important? Well, cobalt is one of those key ingredients, again, if you will, in the recipe of electric vehicle batteries that allows you to drive extremely long ranges. So last week at the Consumer Electronics Show, All the car companies like Chrysler, Toyota, General Motors, Ford, the European makers, and a number of Chinese makers committed to going 100% electric vehicle by 2028. And in some cases, as early as 2025, including Volvo. So again, how does Western Canada take advantage of this? We know Alberta has the lithium. We know Saskatchewan has these vast cobalt reserves. What does Manitoba offer? World-class nickel deposits. Nickel in almost its purest form. High-grade quality nickel. Again, another one of those key ingredients that electric vehicle batteries require. So, this is a real opportunity for the federal government, for the various provincial governments to work together. So then the question becomes, what can the provinces and the federal government do? Well, first of all, we have 10 different sets of regulations around mining operations. Plus, we have a federal sort of overbody that provides another set of regulations. So if we could streamline that process, if we could review, for example, Bill C-69, which is often referred to as like an oil bill, but, Bill C-69 with input from the electric vehicle supply chain internationally could really be modified and make Canada a net exporter of precious metals and lithium for electric vehicles. So, we need our governments at the provincial level, at the federal level, to find a way to start this conversation before it passes us by. Because, Cory, you and I both know that if we don't start that conversation at the government level with industry, and we don't start it soon, that the industry will look to Brazil. The industry will look to Australia. The industry will look to mainland China. The industry is currently in the United States. So this last 10 days, Tesla, they just, one of the world's biggest electric car makers, they signed a huge deal for nickel mining operations in the United States. Why are we in Canada, and specifically Western Canada, not emulating those very things in order to ensure that we have a strong economic future over the coming 10 years?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I like that you brought up C-69 because it's an anti-business bill. It's an anti-development bill, not just oil and gas. It's just that was, though, what that bill was modeled to target. I think that's part of the problem we've had with these discussions is a lot of people, environmentalists and federal people, have been modeling it as an either-or thing. They're saying we have to shut down the oil field and then move on to this. Well, we can complement our conventional energy development while expanding our development of these other resources. We got world markets. It's that intrusive nature that we seem to have a lot of the difficulties with. I know a commenter there had mentioned, what do we do with disposing of the batteries? That is a thing that has to be dealt with these things. But what are we doing with all that lithium sitting in settling ponds?
And that's a great question, by the way, the battery. So the good news is that they're actually recycling electric vehicle batteries. So one of the founders of, not Elon Musk, but one of his partners who helped found Tesla has also founded a major company in the United States that actually recycles electric vehicle batteries. And they've begun to really ramp up those operations. So, then the question becomes like, what else can Western Canada bring to the table as we see these huge economic shifts? So one of the questions that often comes up is, well, what will we use to power electric vehicles? Manitoba, this great prairie province, has tremendous hydroelectric power resources at its disposal. And so the question becomes, yes, it's very important that we sell energy through a north-south corridor to U.S. states. I understand that. But it is time for Canada and for Manitoba to start looking at east-west corridors. I argue that Manitoba should be selling hydroelectric power, which is perfectly clean and renewable, but more importantly, it's consistent. Unlike a wind turbine, unlike a solar panel, hydroelectric power is always there. So Manitoba should be exporting that energy to Saskatchewan, to Alberta, to Ontario. And we know that Quebec has been doing that for half a century, and there's huge economic opportunities. So I don't think all is lost for Western Canada and for Canada. I think the electric vehicle revolution that's happening, that there's a huge opportunity, but I think it's going to require some real leadership and a real serious discussion. And that discussion might make some people uncomfortable, but the reality is that's where the markets are going. When companies like the big three from Canada or from North America say that they're going all electric, when the European makes are doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand, and that's where a lot of trends are going. But we've got some other concerns, I guess, is just how they're doing it, right? Rather than letting market forces, we have a couple of things actually. I just want to hit on quickly. Cheryl brought up a commenter, that a Chinese company that made some big news had just bought or taken over one of Canada's largest lithium mines. And, we want to make sure we get domestic benefit from these developments. Another commenter pointing out that these resources are the property of the province, not nationally yet. But if we develop them, the whole country can benefit. But I mean, what I get,
I agree with you. The
Yeah.
whole country could benefit from this if we run them.
plentiful, affordable energy. We all do better for it. I mean, hey, if we get a whole bunch more electric going on in the West, that means we can export that much more bitumen to other areas, or natural gas if we ever get an LNG plant finished up. I mean, it still benefits. And again, we've made this debate so either or, and it's hurting us all around. I really do. But we've got to make sure that we aren't punishing. Like we heard that proposal from the Electric Vehicles Association saying they want to put a tax of $4,000 on every SUV. That's not market driven. That's punitive. And that's when we start getting our backs up, I guess you could say.
Yeah, listen, I agree with you. I am not, for me, speaking as purely as a private citizen, I don't subscribe to the idea that we need to have punitive tax measures here in Canada in order to make this shift happen. Look, I'm going to say something that's going to maybe make you and many of your listeners uncomfortable.
I'm uncomfortable all the time.
My prediction is that in less than 5 years, anybody that walks into a car dealership to purchase a new vehicle, a truck, a car, an SUV, there will not be a gasoline or diesel car or truck there. The only option will be electric, because I take the car companies at their words. And so the reality then becomes, how do we leverage what we know is going to happen, and how do we make the most economic advantage from that?
Yeah, like I differ. I think that's where things are going, but I kind of feel your time frame is a little aggressive. I think perhaps an optimistic. I mean, we don't have the energy infrastructure to manage that right now. And hey, when there's demand, what will cause is a false market of people grabbing American or wherever they have to. That the price for a combustion engine car is going to go through the roof. I mean, you really would have to battle consumer drive in order to change it like that. I mean, if you're saying it just wouldn't be available because the dealers aren't doing it, well, there's going to be a big problem. Like it may be there, but 5 years, I got to.
Yeah, no, I'll give you a real world example. So, and this should have been a major international story, but for whatever reason, it wasn't covered in Canada. So the Hyundai, and by the way, I'm not promoting this company, but the Hyundai Motor Group, which owns Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, they actually announced over the Christmas holiday break that they shut down their entire engine development program. That entire department was given a pink slip and was told, we are no longer going to be developing or trying to advance an internal combustion engine. They actually said, you can go home now. So what the Hyundai Group is going to do is they're going to sell off their existing fleet of vehicles over the remainder of that generation. So over the next 3 years, they're going to go all electric. I was in Halifax, downtown Halifax the other day at the Halifax Autoport, which is North America's second largest autoport. And oddly enough, I saw a giant cargo ship pulling into the harbor, and there were rows and rows of electric Volkswagen SUVs. So, the car companies are making these decisions, and, the consumer is going to have that as a choice. And so knowing that,
well, when we say that a dealership won't carry combustion engines, then they don't have a choice, and that's where I start to take issue. I mean, electric vehicles are agreeable; they're getting better and better. The range is getting longer; they're getting more affordable, and the infrastructure is starting to come. But I wonder about that 5 years you mentioned. It just seems quick.
Yeah, I mean, like, what's a famous thing that everybody in Western Canada recognizes, right? The Ford F-150 pickup truck. And again, I'm not, promoting one truck over another. I know all kinds of people have their favorites. But if we look at the Ford F-150 pickup truck, that's going all electric. And, Ford has announced that they could triple the production of that vehicle. The problem that's holding them back right now is that they need to key up their assembly lines in order to satisfy the demand. And then we saw General Motors unveil the electric Silverado pickup truck and the new electric Hummer. The Hummer is that kind of infamous massive SUV that was, quite popular in the early to mid 1990s. And so all these things are happening before us, and these market disruptions and innovations are happening. And like I said, Alberta can take advantage of this, right? They have the lithium. Saskatchewan has the cobalt. Manitoba has the nickel. Manitoba has the ability to supply hydroelectric power, as does British Columbia. The North has all kinds of gold deposits. And so then the question becomes, why are we not having this conversation? And what do we need to do to ensure that Western Canada and the rest of Canada is going to benefit from this? Because as I said earlier, if we don't do this, other countries in the world will step up and take advantage of it, and will be poor because of it.
Oh, and I certainly agree with you at the very least that, hey, we've got a resource with a growing market, though, with all of those metals, all of that mining, and we'd be fools not to take advantage of it and develop it. And we should be pushing on with that. I mean, get mining, get digging, let's get on this. I mean, we can only benefit. Even whether or not, we could differ on how soon, if and when the electric wave is going to take over prairie vehicles as a dominant thing, it doesn't mean we can't be making a good deal of money and employing a lot of people by mining and exporting these materials for other areas where it's a bigger demand.
Yeah, and not only that, but also we know that really big provinces, and I know Alberta's a big province. I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way, but those really big populous provinces like in Ontario, like in Quebec, they're hungry for hydroelectric power. Right. So there's a huge opportunity for Manitoba, again, to, export that product to a market that is looking for it. So, look, I think there's a lot of good news in Western Canada for the future. I think there's a lot of good news for Canada in the future, but it's going to come down to, are we prepared to have that discussion? And if we're not going to have that discussion in a serious way, then we're going to lose out on that opportunity. And I don't want to see that happen for my fellow Canadians. And I don't want to see that happen for the next generation of Canadians. I have kids that are in university, and, I want to be able to ensure that the economic advantages that we had growing up, that we will be able to pass on those types of advantages to the next generation.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and, having that discussion with us today. Again, it's all a lot of food for thought, and, the world's changing, and we'll adapt, and hopefully beneficially all around. So thanks for joining me today, Clinton. It's good to have you back on the show again. Where can we find out more information on what you're up to and what you're doing out there?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter. It's at Clinton Devoe. I'm always sharing stories that I discover related to innovation and disruptions in the marketplace. And I always, I'll express my thoughts from time to time and that kind of thing. So I want to thank you for bringing me on again. I really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you and another time and hearing from your viewers.
You bet, Clinton. We'll be talking again. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right, before we get on and discuss more of that, we will discuss another energy thing. There's one of the things that maybe I'll get a guest on who can explain that is Bitcoin mining. How on earth, because it apparently uses a whole lot of power and generation, yet it's for a cryptocurrency, a digital resource. So I'm not sure how that works, but it does work. And Bitcoin is, of course, it's the dominant cryptocurrency out there right now, and it's the one that's got the most interest. And Bitcoin Well, these guys are an Alberta company, and they are helping you get involved and get onto that cryptocurrency market. They partnered with Power ED by Athabasca University to create a free online curriculum about Bitcoin. If you go to bitcoinwell.com/learn, you can enroll in what they call Bitcoin Academy, which, will teach you what Bitcoin's about, what it does, how you can take part in it safely, with your funds. I mean, people are worried about that. There's so many things springing up. You want to make sure if you're going to get into the cryptocurrency world that you're doing it with a good, solid, reputable company. Well, Bitcoin Well is just that sort of company. And they have corporate options too. You can pay your employees in Bitcoin with the Employer Bitcoin Savings Plan. And actually, we're setting that up around here. Portion of your payments to employees can come out as Bitcoin if the employees choose to, of course. So go to bitcoinwell.com and learn about the benefits of buying and holding Bitcoin for your business. So, okay. And then, just some follow-up. I'm seeing a lot of the commenters. And you see the Shane Wenzel just said it a moment ago, which is kind of where I am. Is the transition should be driven by consumers and not the other way around. That's just where my beef is. And I think a lot of people, we when new technologies come along, usually they'll evolve just because people want them. They've been marketed, they've been developed, and people embrace them because they're superior to what they'd had previously. But we do keep getting a feeling like this electric wave is being shoved down our throat. We don't want it, but they're saying we have to have it. And that's what gets our backs up. And I mean, the electric technology is getting better. It's getting more affordable. But when it'll come about or when people choose, it always comes down to that thing with politics in general. Let us choose. That's all. Let us choose. Hey, I'm not in love with any form of energy. If I could buy a $20,000 electric car that'll give me a 600-kilometer range and works in cold weather, I'm getting one. But they're not there quite yet. But maybe they will. But the discussion has to be there. And I like where Clinton's going, though. He's talking about the other parts. Let's not get our backs up and forget, well, even if it isn't building up here, there's all these other countries and areas that want lithium. They want cobalt. They want, the Americans, if they start moving to that, they're going to be drawing a heck of a lot more electricity. As people are saying in the commenters, we don't have the power infrastructure, as Cheryl said. And it's true. It's coming perhaps, but we don't have it now. But if we build it, let's sell it. We sell power. I'm not in love with just selling oil and gas. Hell, if somebody wants to buy it, we'll dig it up and sell it. There's going to be some other challenges. That's part of the problem. You got to remember, environmentalists, they're crazy. They oppose everything. So when we propose a new lithium mine, the environmentalists are going to come out of the woodworks and oppose it. That's part of why I was talking about C69. That applies to mines as well. Try a cobalt mine, they're going to come after us. Try and make a dam out in Manitoba and expand the hydroelectric, which I think they should. But that's not going to go without opposition. I believe James was mentioning the Site C Dam in BC. I mean, how long has that been going on? And the environmentalists are all going haywire over that thing too. We can't even get the renewable sources built without environmentalists blocking up the entire process. One thing promising out of Jason Kenney talking is, and that's what I'm talking about, complementary things. He was talking about, micro nuclear sort of generation plants that can help with getting more resources out of the oil sands. Like these other sources can complement each other. We've got tailing ponds. We do have to figure out what to do with what's in them, and heavy metals is a lot of it. If somebody wants to buy the stuff we got in them, well, hell, let's get it out of there and sell it. Lithium, great, get it out of there. We can only use so much in the psychiatric institutions. Let's get the rest out for batteries. It's useful that way. So it's a pragmatic look at what we've got. I mean, we're a resource economy. It's not, as long as you're not saying shut down what you've already got going, why not embrace something else that's happening? And the problem is a lot of our politicians do talk about shutting down the existing one. And that's why we're always so hypersensitive when we hear about these things. As Jade's saying, replacing the batteries is terrifically expensive for these cars right now. It's coming down. It's getting there. But again, as long as it's market driven, I don't care. Just keep it market driven. Of course, that's always a big ask, unfortunately, of our government people who don't like market driven. They like to direct what we're doing. But let's keep having these conversations. I don't want to shut out the prospect of taking part in this market. Come on, let's get some more money in our wallets. We can all use it, even if it's Bitcoin. So I'm going to talk on a bit of a more sensitive area right now. There's a story that came out, and Linda Slobodian wrote a column at westernstandardonline.com about it. On the, of course, those grave sites that we found out in Kamloops, outside of the residential school site, and a lot of the readings. And there's a professor, his name is Jacques Roulard, and he's with the University of Montreal History Department. And he posed the question asking in an article, that when are we going to exhume, though? Not one body's been actually physically brought out and found yet. I mean, we turned the whole country upside down when we were horrified by this discovery. And regardless of the what's happened or hasn't happened in those cemetery sites, we had it put in our face that the residential school system was a terrible, terrible thing. It was an awful thing. And again, that reminder to people, this is what happens when you let governments control your lives. Nobody wins. When you take a minority and you do something for their own good, think about that. We're hearing that again, aren't we? Either way, we're not taking people and putting them in residential schools, but children died at them and they were buried on site, and it was horrible. But how many? And it's a valid question. Now, I don't think we should go out and rip around and exhume every one of those out there. But let's talk about GPR, because that's what they've been using to find it. Because, I actually did use ground penetrating radar a lot in my past career. I was a surveyor. I spent 4 years working in the Mackenzie Delta and on the Beaufort Sea in the Arctic. I've referenced that before when I've been on here. And my job actually was to make maps where I would integrate GPR data from guys going out there with noggins, and they would drag it behind a snowmobile or a truck or even a nod well, depending on how thick the ice was at that time. And it gives a fantastic representation of how thick the ice is. So I could build maps color-coded for the crews so they knew how heavy a vehicle they could put on which part of the project. Kind of an important job. You don't want to go through the ice. It's pretty freaky that way. We were very safe. We didn't have any breakthroughs or anybody hurt. Now, GPR, ground penetrating radar, the way it works, though, is it refracts, right? So you have your unit, it's sending a signal down, it's coming back. And how you can measure things is what you need is a difference in density. You can set your frequencies to penetrate certain types of densities and refract on others. And it works beautifully for ice thicknesses, because ice and water have massively different frequencies. So if you set that thing to refract on water, you get a very accurate measurement on how thick that ice is when you put it over it. So when you look at it, if you're not used to it, the data just looks like a bunch of squiggly lines. It's not that exciting. You have to be trained to realize what you're seeing when you see that, to see a thin spot in the ice or things like that. And that's why I made color-coded maps. Now, when we get into grave sites, I can understand. I've never used GPR on something like that, but I can understand how it would work well, because when you've taken ground, you've dug it out, you've disturbed it, you've replaced it, you put something down there, the ground density is going to change. And I don't know if people, I'm a dork. I watch Time Team a lot, actually, on there was an old BBC program, and they'd go out in GPR areas and they would find even old graves from like Roman times. That ground disturbance still stands out. It's not the most exact science in the world, but a grave tends to be pretty distinct. It'd be like an oval shape, but it's not assured. You do have to calibrate, you do have to check, you do have to have a baseline. You can't say definitively found burial sites until you've exhumed a couple to confirm that that's actually what they are. And that's a delicate thing. That's somebody, very possibly, very likely, somebody's resting place. And we don't want to frivolously dig those up. But we want to work on real numbers also. I mean, you can get a lot of false reports on GPR. I mean, when I used GPR, we would also have to periodically stop and physically auger through the ice and check it with a measuring stick, through the ice to the water against the GPR, just so we know we have the settings right. I mean, we can get some false readings of thick and thin ice. It's a good broad measure of things. I'm pretty confident they found grave sites at those Kamloops locations, but we need to know how many. It is important, and we need to know the basis of it. Some of the other things that are maybe we could see possible causes of death. There's a lot of things. We need to go a little further with this rather than taking it at its word. And Linda's not trying to be insensitive. I mean, Linda's a very established journalist. She witnessed the exhumation of mass graves in Bosnia. She knows how horrifying and again, sensitive this sort of subject is. But we need to investigate. I mean, we put our flags down for months over what we feel was probably a lot of children who were abused, taken away from their households, and kept in these residential schools. And the one path to resolution, there's a number of things we have to do, but one of which is just getting as much fact as possible. Unfortunately, the records have been terribly kept, and the governments haven't been very good at releasing them if they do have them. So going further and following up on what we found on these sites is important. So, check out Linda's column at westernstandardonline.com to see some of the background on that. Let's look at a couple of other news items in BC. Speaking of which, Aaron Gunn You might be familiar with him. I've been on actually his show before. He's been on my show before. He's a political figure in BC, quite a social media character. And he tried to run for the BC Liberal leadership. He made a push for it. He was gaining some steam. He was getting some popularity. And they pulled the rug out from under him. They said, no, you're too controversial. We don't even want to let you run. And they stopped his run. So, to start with, that's one of the things that kind of ticks me off. I don't like that in parties. I don't like that in nominations. I don't like it in internal races. My view is more of the base Democratic idea. I don't care how crazy they are. Let them run. If they're really that loopy or anything, and I don't think Aaron Gunn is loopy, by the way, the voters will choose. They'll reject him. I talked about that with Kevin J. Johnson, the running man who almost froze to death trying to get into Montana like a lunatic as he was hiding from his very well-deserved jail time that he was supposed to serve. How did he do? Because some people said he shouldn't even run in the election. He got 0.4%, people. 0.4. The voters, well, like I said, I get critical of Canadians in general, but they aren't that dumb. And when it comes to Aaron Gunn, he should be allowed to run. I don't think he's anything like Kevin J. Johnson, but that's what I mean, that excuse to say we shouldn't even let them run. Well, that means you don't trust your own members. You don't trust them to make a smart decision. And that's not a good Democratic idea. So now what Aaron Gunn has done is he's launched what's called Common Sense BC. It's an initiative is what they're calling it right now. But it's going to be probably morphing into another political party. BC is a very strange creature in politics. They've always been unpredictable, particularly in the Lower Mainland, but all over the province. I mean, they've always had corruption problems from their social credit and old NDP days, from Mike Harris and Van der Zam, for those of us old enough to remember all that goodness out of there. That's part of the way the social credit was in power forever, then just blew themselves up gloriously. They vanished. The NDP got in. The Liberal Party took over as the conservative-ish option out there. So yeah, it's Reed Small, as you can see on that picture, has been reporting on that at westernstandardonline.com for our BC viewers or Albertans curious about it. And conservatives in BC have just really had a hard time trying to find themselves. The Conservative Party of BC is a tiny little rump of a party. It rarely gets seats. The Liberal Party of BC is not connected with the federal Liberal Party, by the way. They're quite conservative, at least relative to the federal ones. Now this Common Sense BC initiative out of Aaron, we'll see where it goes. I mean, being Aaron, it's going to be a conservative movement. There's no getting around that. How successful it is the next question. And again, BC faces a similar problem to Alberta. We're in a first past the post system. You got NDP, in their case, in power. In our case, might be in power soon. And you start splitting that vote up between a whole bunch of conservative parties. And you know what? The NDP just stays there. So it's an interesting development to see what Aaron's doing out there. And we'll see where that goes in the future. And Jeremy Farkas, it's good to see him commenting and watching there as he's gotten his rest after the election. He made a hell of a go in Calgary. Unfortunately, they put her worship, Jyoti Gondek, in as mayor, and we're already starting to see that, wow, we're going to be looking back on the good old days of Naheed Nenshi and his conservative common sense government. But either way, I still appreciate Jeremy's work and efforts. And yes, he's a market-driven sort of guy, and that's what he's commenting on. There's no harm in pursuing the opportunity if it doesn't come at the expense of what we're already good at. Yes, we can complement these things. They can come together when we're talking about electrical vehicle development, mining, stuff such as that. So let's see. I'm going to move along here. Make sure to go to the westernstandardonline.com. Let's talk, a bit about ourselves. It's important. We don't get tax funding. We need you guys to subscribe. And it's been great. We got a fantastic base. Derek's a pain, but he's done a hell of a job actually of putting this together and getting this media outlet going. And subscribers are coming on strong and steady, and we want to keep them coming on. So if you haven't subscribed already, get on there. It's $10 a month. I think $100 a year if you're going to take out an annual. You can take it out for a trial basis so you can get behind the paywall, check those stories out, and see that it's well worth. I mean, we're putting out a lot of content now, and good content. And for $10 a month, less than you used to get the newspaper delivered to your house, and you don't have to hide from the paper boy to avoid tipping him, and leave those bits of change in the mailbox anymore. It's just straight online. It's out there. It's easy, less expensive than those, and you help support us. And then the more supporters we get, the more sponsors we get, because we can prove our readership. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. On social media as well, spread it around. That's the new way to get around, right? And as somebody was pointing out, yeah, we're on Rumble as well. If you want to get away from some of those ones like Facebook, we're on YouTube. We are on Parler. We're on Getter. We're on Twitter. We're on all those things. And don't just follow us on them, but share it. You know, the more people we get watching, the more people taking part, the better we can provide. It's just a nice big circle, bypassing the mainstream media with what they feed us, which we know is typically pap. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be back at 11:30 a.m. and I got a couple more guests coming on. It's going to be something of a Western and agricultural theme. I'm starting with Kelly Malmberg. I did have him on in a past show a little while ago. He's an agricultural producer down by Vulcan. He's in the Blackie area. Long story, and I won't bother you guys with it on here. I did live in Blackie for 1 year due to one of my failed relationships. Either way, Kelly will come on. We're going to talk about agricultural issues because a lot of people are asking questions about why the hell is it costing me so much to buy bread or beef or anything at the supermarket when we're living in an agricultural capital. And the agricultural producers are kind of saying the same thing. Why is it costing so much to buy all these products when I'm not getting a better price at market myself when I'm growing and raising these things? So Kelly's going to talk to us. We had him on before, but we had some technical issues and difficulties. So it's going to be worthwhile bringing him back. After that, I'm going to have Ty Northcott. And I don't know if you guys remember him. You should. So if we remember the big rodeo we had, we used those pictures all over on the Western Standard. That was the big rodeo last year in May, I believe it was. Ty held the Rebel Rodeo. Basically, he's a rodeo organizer. He raises rodeo stock and he organizes rodeos. And you'll see he's your good old classic crusty cowboy. And of course, he got charged on a number of things for daring to hold a rodeo in Alberta. What a frightening time we're in when a rodeo in Alberta is illegal. But the rodeo was a hell of a time. It was a good time just south of Bowden. They've been putting off his court case over and over and over again. His next date's January 25th. He's not sure if he's going in for it or they're going to defer it again. I want to check in with him, see how he's been doing since the rodeo, what he's got to look forward to. I'm sure he's probably got more rodeos planned. He's a very rebellious. He's a good old classic Albertan, and it's going to be a good conversation with him. So that's about all I have for today, guys. Thank you very much for all tuning in. Thanks for being patient for that first little bit of sound. But as Dave said, you know, I'm a lot more tolerable sometimes when my mouth's moving, but you can't hear what's coming out of it. And keep the comments coming. Keep sending stuff to me. C. Morgan at westernstandardonline.com, except for that other fellow with those pictures. And follow me on Twitter at Cory B. Morgan. I'll talk to you tomorrow, and have a good day.